Okay, so I'm Sean. This is Anthony, and we're happy to have everybody here tonight. Still have some good conversation going on in the back. That's all right. I see you. Take note. I had a math professor in college who had everybody's social security number memorized, and used to call us out by our social security number and then write our names. That was insane. So anyway, so who here has heard of Data Community DC? Wow. Okay, it's getting much better every time. Yes. So we are an organization that started off as some people who wanted to geek out amongst friends, have a beer. Yes.
Pictures on these phones?
Oh, that's right. You're here to do that. I mean, you know the answer to that, dude. Okay, so for the sake of data, which is what many of us here are data scientists. Whoever said yes to data, they know data community, please raise your hand and hold it up and keep it up.
Until I say stand down. All right. Okay.
Okay, cool. So that is for a project which I'll mention later on. It has a lot of value. So Data Community started some years ago, and we've grown from a couple guys having beers to 8 different programs: Data Science DC, Women's Data Science DC, which last DataViz we got some help on the logo, so no worries, it's coming. Data Innovation DC, Data Education, DataViz, Statistical Programming, Data Wranglers, and Digital Nomads, formerly DC Night Owls. And we have events like this, we have hackathons, we have private conferences, and workshops, and everything like that. So next, we have grown quite a bit from when we started. We're at 13,000. That is not double counting. I'm a data scientist. Those are all unique. And we counted for each group based on which group they entered first, right? So some people are part of multiple groups, but we counted it for whoever they joined first. And in general, we're always looking for sponsorship. It's generally around 3,000 to come across all 8 programs, 10 events per month, 600 to 700 data scientists reached per month, about $3,000 a quarter if you want to reach all of those people, 13,000 in total. We have the hackathons, which generally you have to pay for the food, so it ends up costing a few $1,000s. Newsletter if you want to have your jobs advertised, and then there's private conferences. And I just mentioned some of the general needs. We are always looking for speakers. Speakers is a really tough thing for us. It's one of the hardest things. We're always looking for expertise as well. And I mentioned that the hands raised thing. Actually, I don't think I put it up here. I think that's what the 6 is for. But we're working on buttons. We're working on automating some of our e-commerce and Squarespace for Data Community. We want to. Who here is currently looking for a job? Okay. Maybe you come talk to me afterwards. We want to make it easier for you guys to find the people who have jobs. We want to formalize that process. So that's what the event introduction program is for. And then some other things like who here got waitlisted and then decided to come anyway? Nice. Nice. Those are some veterans right there. So, one of the hardest things, Meetup has gotten incredibly spammy over the years. You only have 40% or so that actually come. So I have a little algorithm. I'll talk about it in a minute, but I have a little algorithm that figures out the probability you'll actually show up. So anyway, next slide. So, looking for the right opportunity, we want to formalize the employers that are coming to these events or who want to find you guys who are looking for jobs at these events. And if you're interested in knowing more, can find me afterwards. Next. In general, though, be a speaker, teach a class, organize events, be a sponsor, help us build web apps, blog about whatever you want to blog about as long as it has to do with data. And cross-promotion, and there's lots of different partnership opportunities. I'm not going to go through this again, but if anybody, who here organizes their own meetup or own events? 1, 2, 3, 4, well, okay, there's a guy who came anyway, so that's why he's a veteran. So that is all of the venues that Data Community is close with. So if you're having trouble finding a venue, we have close relationships with everybody on that chart, and you can come talk to us and we'll help you get a space. We did it recently for DC Femtech. Next. This is a very cute looking visualization of how I was choosing who's on the wait list and who isn't. So I basically create relationships between people based on the events that they go to together, the groups that they're both a part of, or the topics that they're interested in, which creates a relationship between the people, which creates a social network, which means I can find out who the influencers of the social network are, which means that I can figure out the probability that you're really involved in this network or not involved in this network. And if you're not involved, it's less likely you'll come, and so you can figure out who's going to come and who's not going to come. Hopefully I can turn this into an actual web app for everybody in the coming months, but it's out on GitHub if you want to go play with the code.
So why do you think it waitlisted my intern?
Oh, that was, I knew he just knew what to do. Oh, I didn't know you were the intern.
So I'm just kidding.
Oh, okay. You got confirmed. Are you one of the ones who emailed me and was like, hey? Okay. Oh. We'll have to go dig into that data. At Brunch and Hack, we can do it at Brunch and Hack. I generally work on this stuff every first and third Saturdays. We get together on Saturday, grab bagels, lox, cream cheese, capers, beer mimosas, hack on stuff, talk about life. Next. And of course, we have all of our sponsors. And for that, I will turn it over to.
Well, who wants to make data great again? Our data is winning. Our sponsors are winners. Who's Allen Hamilton? A winner. AOL? A winner. Statistics.com, I don't even want to tell you how much they're winning. And with our sponsors, you can win too. You're going to win so much, you're going to be tired of winning. So with statistics.com, you can learn more about winning. You can predict how much over the average you're going to win. It's going to be a T-curve of winning. So, Chief, the winners for tonight, thank you for hosting us. Thank you, thank you. You can't say Chief without saying you're a winner.
This is nothing. The weird transition there.
I didn't say anything about wall.
One more forward. So the people who I'm trying to fill this spot with are doing a lot of work behind the scenes for Data Community. So they get a special shout out. They're trying to fill a consulting opportunity for DHS. If anybody here is interested, please come and talk to me afterwards. And these guys are also doing a lot of great work for Data Community, and they currently have a Kickstarter going. So if you're interested in promoting local data scientists who are helping to build online education in a completely new and different way, go to datasociety.co/Kickstarter and help make this happen, because this is all organically, locally driven. And the guys who are organizing this are going to help us out in a few months and help grow this organization and provide some of those tools I was talking about in a more professional format. So please go tell your friends. This is really important to the organization.
It's going to be huge.
It's going to be huge. I love it. I love it. Anybody else though? So this is where we walk the floor. So I've been talking enough. Anybody else have announcements? Anything anybody would like to say?
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Allie. I work for Dev Bootcamp DC. We are a 19-week immersive coding bootcamp, and we're coming to DC later this year. And we are looking for some leadership positions. So any senior developers who are passionate about technology education, find me after.
19 weeks after you take a course, people will say, "You're hired."
Anybody else? Announcements? Bueller. Okay. Next. Right, so Fatina has actually found somebody for lightning talks. And I believe I have one other one. If anybody would like to give a presentation next month for 5 to 10 minutes or so, please come talk to me afterwards. And next. And then, of course, there's the competition with Graphicacy and Nathaniel and Will. And this is the first time that we're doing this. If you go over here, we go like, there we go. So this is some of the data that is going to be available. There's a $1,000 cash prize for the winner. We're taking this data, and whoever can visualize it in the most interesting way, along with some other data that's provided on the website. Whoever can visualize it in the best way will end up winning that prize. And we're going to show all of the different people at not the March. What's that? This is February, March, in the April, right? So they're due on the 11th, right? Of April, and then we'll have an event to showcase everybody's stuff after that. So if you're interested, go to
MajorLeagueDataChallenge.com.
Major League Data Challenge.
So the idea is to visualize the nomination process.
Right.
That's one piece of the data, obviously, the number of delegates that you get over time, but there are lots of other things that you could use to tell the story of what's been going on in this crazy election year. Who, why Trump might win, or why Hillary might lose, or whatever. Right. Find an angle on that story and tell it as a sort of a data journalist.
Well, I mean, I think you have another slide on it. Okay. So next. Was anybody here for the December event? Catherine,
I was here. That was awesome.
Yes, it was awesome. Catherine's here somewhere. Where'd she
She's
go?
right there,
She's
right next
there. She's right next to me. I'm like looking like this. So guys, stand up for a second. So she presented, and she was awesome. And as a result, I give out index cards. So everybody, hold up your index card, and we are going to be capturing today's event on that index card the best that we can. You're going to tweet it to #DataDC. And I think I'll put that on the meetup page shortly, just to remind everybody. But #DataDC when you tweet it, and then we're going to have a quick little competition at the end. And we'll give Casey's wherever he went, probably went to go get the T-shirt. We'll get a T-shirt at the end.
Data
With me 2 or 3 times leading up to the event, trying to make sure that we did this well and did this right, speaks volumes to somebody who's trying to get into the process, get into the details, and just generally do a good job. So let's give a round of applause for Nathaniel Pearlman.
So this is what we're hoping to go through in the presentation. I want to make this a lot more interactive than just, we've never done this particular presentation before, and I would really prefer it if you interrupted me with questions or will, and just make it something that is not just linear, so have at me. Here's what we're going to try to do. We're going to talk about, well, we were going to talk about the contest launch in a little more detail, and feel free to ask questions at this point, but there's also information if you go to that contest website about the contest in more detail. It's the second one we did. The first one was on baseball, and we got a fair amount of interesting entries from that. Lots of things that I wouldn't have imagined people doing, including very complicated Excel visualizations and things like that. I'm working on a list of the books that have been inspiring to me in terms of making these kind of interactive or information graphic projects. So I'm going to show you that list, which is a little quirky and probably not, some of the things would be normal to have on a list and some wouldn't. And I'd like you to add to that for me. Let me know about books that you thought were useful or interesting, because The Truthful Art, for example, is a good one. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about how I got into this, because this has not been my career. I started out as a software entrepreneur, I guess, and switched into this as something to do for fun, and have been learning about it for the last 6-7 years. And then we're going to go into and hopefully we'll do most of that pretty quickly. And then we're going to go into some more detail about how to make large information graphics, including some examples of ours, talking about them. We'll go into the Supreme Court one in some detail as a finished product, and then go through the creation process of that, where we have some of the artifacts of the work we did, starting with sketches and early outputs in R. All those posters are built in R as programmed from the data, and then final publishing in Illustrator for print and stuff like that. So, and then I'm hoping there'll be time to talk a little bit about what I call design entrepreneurship. I started Timeplots and then added the Graphicacy, the services arm, because I wanted to do projects, both ones that I was interested in, ones for clients. And I would love to talk to people who have their own projects that they would like to do, but want to figure out how can you possibly do that? How can you figure out a way to get funding for it, or to just do it on the side, or I'm just really interested in kind of the subject of entrepreneurship, whether it's in the nonprofit world or in the for-profit world, and I'm happy to talk to people here as part of this or afterwards, because that's definitely a passion for me. So that's the quick overview of the presentation. Anyone? And feel free right now to ask questions. Don't be shy.
That's why I'm standing back here, is in case you want to ask a question, just tap me and I'll get you in there.
So, Will, why don't you take this?
I have one question to start.
Yep.
As housekeeping. Is it too hot in here? Is it getting too warm? Okay. We'll open some of the doors probably to cool it off a little bit. Don't mind us. That was it. Great.
So as was mentioned, we've got our Major League Data Challenge coming up. And the challenge is to visualize the presidential nomination. There's a $1,000 grand prize, but there's also 3 other cash prizes for gold, silver, and bronze. Deadline is April 11th. And you can go to majorleaguedatachallenge.com. There are flyers in the back as well, if you want more information. Questions?
Just a really simple question. Why April 11th? And a related question, how do you plan on rolling out the person who eventually wins this thing?
So what we did, April 11th was mainly because most of the results will be in by then. And
At least a lot of them.
But and then how do we plan on rolling it out? Last time, we have some judges. They're actually pretty eminent people, except me, in the list of judges, and so it takes them a little bit of time to process the entries. First, actually, as a firm, we cull the ones that have no shot, and then we pass the better entries, and it really depends on how many come in. The better entries to the judges. They rate all of them, and then we We send an email to everybody who entered the contest about it. We have a press release. Well, and since we're teaming up with these guys, they'll be part of that as well. And then I think we're gonna, do this as part of their next meetup.
Yeah.
So we got to sort that all out. But it will happen not too long after the end of the contest.
But the contest is really aimed at people like you, I think. We want the Alberto Cairos of the world to be our judges, not our contestants. So I hope you guys will enter, because we're trying to do it to support the data visualization community around an important topic.
And we saw last time, we didn't anticipate this, but some people entered as teams, which I don't have any objection to. Some team at Stanford came, I think, got third or second, and so sometimes bringing different skill sets, a designer and a developer or whatever. We mean this to be fun. It's not. We know that everybody's got jobs and this is being done on the side. So just don't think that this is the bar is super high. Do something, submit it in, and see what happens.
And if you request the contest information at that URL, you're entered to win a free poster that we're going to be talking about tonight.
Sounds like we have some room to work with in terms of the judging.
What does that mean?
Like we have some room to operate. Like we can decide to do different things with the judging.
Well, we have already established 5 of the 6 judges, but I'm happy to talk to you about the process because, as long as we come up with three winners and we're happy, and they're all good. So this is another thing I expect to do really quickly. Here's a list of some books that inspired me for one reason or another. Sometimes you might read them and wonder why, but a lot of them are super good, and most of you would know them, like Tufte's, obviously, and I took a class with him as an undergrad, and he's kind of stayed with me. But please either tweet or email us other things that should be on this list. That's all I'm asking for there. Okay, I'm going to go quickly through how I got into this on the hope that it'll be interesting, but also in that if you know a little bit more about me, you might have better questions to ask about things that I cover. So I think I am not unlike a lot of people in this room, somebody who is interested in data and started out that way as a child, memorizing baseball statistics and quizzing my brother about capitals of countries and kind of being interested in knowing things and not just, not only just sports or games or whatever. And then in college, where I was a computer science major, I took a course as a senior with Ed Tufte, which was a statistics and a little bit of DataViz course. And that really changed a lot of things for me because I was starting to think about not wanting to be a computer science professor, but wanting to apply it and wanting to think about areas that I could connect programming with that might do some good in the world. So I remember he gave us an assignment like, go find some good examples of DataViz. And they didn't call it that by then. It was information graphics. And I went into the big library at the university I went to and wandered around looking at books about weather and, home ownership in Japan or whatever. And it's really hard to find excellent examples. It was particularly hard back then. There's been so many developments and tools and more availability of data since then. That was back in '88. But when I did find some, it seemed exciting to me. Then my second job out of college was at a redistricting firm, which was all about data and maps. And that firm, Election Data Services, they do an election poster every year with a map of how each midterm or general election came out. And I really liked that because I was kind of a political animal and liked seeing the patterns. And so I started thinking, I would like to do some big posters like this or do this one better someday. And in fact, I started thinking about doing a history of the US Senate and what would it be like to track what each Senate seat in every state would be like over time and who held that, and what patterns there would be. But it being 1990 then, it was really a lot harder to do that. The data wasn't available. The computers were slower. You know, I didn't do it. I was too busy. So then I went on, after working as a programmer for a while, to graduate work in political science and statistics, where I kind of pursued more interest in data and learned a little bit about regression and things like that, that probably a lot of you know, and also a lot more about the history of American politics as in a sort of research capacity and in a lot of depth with a theory. But I also decided after 4 years there, I did everything but finish dissertation, that I wasn't going to be a professor of political science. So I started a company called NGP Software, which was just me for 2.5 years up in the attic of my house, and which is now 200 people, now called NGP Van, and has done really well. I ran it for 12 years and then moved on to some other things. In 2007, that's 2 years before I left, before I sold the company, we were doing a 10th anniversary of the company. And it was at the National Press Club, and there's a lot of people, more than even in this room. And I wanted to find a way to convey the story of the company to the people there. And I wanted to honor the people that worked there. To me, you know, what was important to me was who worked there, when, what my relationship was like with them, what they were like with each other. So I made this time plot, which was really a visualization of the company. It was just meant for internal use. And it collected a bunch of data. And you won't be able to see the details, but on the top is the start and the end date of every employee that we ever had, up to the point where the poster finished. And so people could go up in the wall and look and find themselves on the graphic. And I saw that happening a lot. And then it had a picture of everybody, candidates, you know, sometimes more people together, so that you could remember people who had already left, who you enjoyed working with. And then along this part of the timeline, so it's just multiple timelines, were key clients that we picked up. So it was a Democratic political software company. So when we picked up the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, when we picked up Senator Sarbanes, when we picked up different clients, and also things like, when did we get a foosball table? When did we get a ping pong table? You know, when were our retreats? And compiling all that information together. And if you get right down into the very small details, you see all that stuff. And so I got this was just part of being able to express what I cared about using data in a public way. And part of the story. Was that the last thing on that list?
Hey, Nathaniel, let's stay on this one for a second. So you kind of jumped over, go back.
Yep.
Will, there you go. So you kind of jumped over the fact that you went from graduate work to founding a company.
Yep.
You know, did you just do what some of the people in this city do, where you lose your, you know, when people lose their job and they print business cards and they say they're a CEO? That happens. Or did one of your professors like say, you really need to go in this direction, help you find some sort of either a patronage or a funding source or government or something like that? How did that leap happen? Because that's the hardest part, I think, for a lot of people.
Well, it was, I guess, both simple and complicated. It was simple in that I had written software in that space for an existing company, actually for two. And so I knew the arena well as an employee and a contractor. And the person who was selling the most recent piece of software that had actually helped fund my way through grad school on a modest basis, that person was cheating me on royalties and being very difficult. And I didn't like the way they were supporting the product or marketing the product. So I had no experience with business, but I thought, I think I can do at least as good as this guy if I just am honest and nice to employees and treat customers right. I think I can do all right. So I lent myself $10,000, which was most of what I had, and I started to write the code in the attic for a new product. And I started to go out and talk to Democratic fundraisers and sell what we would now call an MVP, a minimum viable product, but to them. And little by little, by the time about 2.5 years in, I had 60, 70 clients paying me subscription to this, and
Okay,
I
so
had to
you
hire somebody.
decide to give yourself $10,000 of your own money,
Yep.
which is, you
Well,
know,
put it into the company.
right, that's
incorporate.
like having some runway is the way that we
Yes.
might talk about it now.
Yep.
In order to go start writing that code. You're the only one writing the code?
I was the only one, yeah.
And so how long until you had an MVP that you felt you could go start trying to sell to people?
I think I wasted a lot of the first 6 months trying to do the wrong thing, trying to build to a big vision. Then I decided to back off that, and I started to go out, which I'm a little shy, but go out into the world and talk to people and see what their actual needs were. And their actual needs were incredibly modest. There were all these fundraisers who were managing their lists in WordPerfect or in Access, and they didn't know how to use a relational database right. They had lots of clients. They wanted to use the same. They wanted to capture information about a donor across multiple clients. So I learned their business, and I had already knew it from other aspects, but I basically listened to them and built things that they needed.
This is a classic thing I hear from jumping from academia to consultancy or something more professional in the commercial world, is that in academia you're trying to impress your peers so that way you can be published or something like that. But in business, they may need something that is, as you put it, much more modest, right?
Yeah,
So,
I went to the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee and I said, can I help you with statistical modeling of, and it's a lot of this is done now, but it wasn't done then, of like where you can raise money or things like that. They didn't have any interest at the time,
So you start redoing it, and it takes you another 3 months to write something that you feel you can start selling?
What I found a firm that needed a first initial product, and I built was a very slim database for them. And then I started to go around to other firms like them. These are all 3 or 4 person firms, and say, look, I have this, and I charged them very little for it because I knew I was going to sell it to other people. I said, I have this tool. I think it could help you. Can I get you to convert your data into it? And here's what I'll charge you for it, and I will be your technical arm.
Now, how did you get into that? Last question before we move on. How did you get into that room to give that pitch? Did you go through some front office with somebody who scheduled the time, or did you social stalk, whatever that means, in 1990?
No, this is all happening.
on the
This is all happening in '97. So
okay.
people are way advanced then. But they're off Nobel networks and stuff. But so I basically moved from one person to another. I went over to I went to the DVDC and talked to their executive director, and he said, well, my wife is a fundraiser. And I talked to her, and she said, I know all the other quote adults who are fundraisers. I can introduce you to some of them. And I think what happened was, little by little, it became a project of not just me, but of the clients that I was gaining. And I never paid anybody for a referral, but all that business for the first 5 or 6 years of the company, where we moved from $16,000 a year in revenue to $500,000 or $750,000 or something like that, that all came from referrals before we hired a sales team and built it into a bigger enterprise. Posters? Oh yeah, so did you want to do anything more on this thing?
I have
So-
another question.
Oh, another
on
question.
that last-
Yep.
I'm curious about,
Hang on a second, Ronnie.
I'm curious about the order of the photographs there. Are they key to the timeline?
I placed every single one of those in myself, but I really tried to put people that were most important in key spots, and I tried to have more more copies of particular people than others if they've been there longer, but no, that is completely unkeyed. So that band is not tied at all to the timeline. Well, it's not possible, I don't think. So now, 2009, starting Timeplots, wanting to do, the company got fairly big. It was like 65, 70 people. And I found managing that group and holding people accountable not as much fun as it was when we were 15 people or 5 people. And so I started doing this in the corner, these posters with one guy I hired, Frank Hamilton, and sometimes an intern or two. And I'm just gonna go through these and give you a very quick explanation of them. This was not the first one we did, but we're gonna get to the first one last. This was a visual history of the US House of Representatives. And what I like about this is I think it has it's a little bit visually arresting. You can see a big pattern being told in the data. And that pattern is in that big red blurry band and that big blue blurry band and in that sort of central graphic. And what you see, if I can point to this, is these are the ideology calculated by some political scientists of every congressman for every Congress. So, and what you see here is a huge divergence in the ideology between members of the House who are Republicans and members of the House who are Democrats. And there was quite an overlap during the time when Southern Democrats were conservative and Northern Republicans were liberal, but that's kind of come apart. And I suspect if we updated the poster to the current day, it would show even more divergence. And so you see this long sweep of American history here, muddy because the two-party system doesn't develop right away, and there's lots of other small parties. And then, so there's that timeline, and then I'm not going to go into the detail at all on this, but there's sort of control of Congress and key legislation and cartograms of the Electoral College and stuff like that going across. So we go to the next one. This history of the Senate. Again, here I was interested in the individuals who held every Senate seat from the beginning to the end. Now, of course, with the data, it's a little tricky because sometimes there's a senator for just a month or something, but this is, and a few of those are left out. But by and large, this is every state. Here's the states, and they're sorted by region because then you can see patterns that you wouldn't see otherwise. So like right here, why is this gap? This is when the South is left out of the Union after the war for a little bit. They lost their representation until they started to behave a little better. So, and you can see, like, this also has the ideology data. So darker red is more conservative Republicans, dark or blue is more liberal Democrats, although the interpretation of some of that data historically is a little complex. But you can see how, like, the South moves from solid Democrat to modestly Democrat to Republican over time. So trying to capture both, if you really bore in, the actual names of every senator, and if you step back, as most of you are trying to see it, just the big patterns of what's happening to the country over time. And down here again is the key legislation and landmark events in the history of the Senate, like when did they move from this place to that place, things like that. So that's the Senate. This is the presidency. This was the second one we did, actually. So this, I wanted to allow kids to visualize the history of the presidency. You know, kids some of them like to memorize things like who are all the presidents in order. Not all kids, but some.
Someone bought this for a 4-year-old.
Yeah. So what I did here with type was size it vertically to a timeline that starts here at 1789 to the length of everybody's term. So you can see Washington, Adams 1 term, Jefferson 2 terms for Madison, Monroe, 1 for John Quincy Adams, and so on, and little tiny people who died soon into their office. But Franklin Roosevelt, doing 3.5 terms is the longest. So you can see, and a lot of designers that I talked to did not like that. I'll let you know. but I liked it, and I liked the way it related back to a 19th century poster on the history of the parties, which is something similar. So that's kind of why it's there, basically because I liked it. And then all these other columns were basically winnowed out of tons of other data columns that we collected on the country as it developed over the couple hundred years, and which sort of made it into the poster on Final Cut. And we had, so this would have been a lot wider, but we had to choose things editorially. And I remember like cutting strips and moving them around, trying to figure out which columns would look nice up against each other. And then there's some, a kind of a separate timeline going across here, which shows the growth of population and of the economy over time, and visual biographies of each of the presidents. So just playing around with information graphics and trying to tell the history of the presidency. This curly line, it sweeps this way when the Democratic Party wins consecutive elections, and this way when the Republicans do. So, and each of the elections has a little scoreboard about who won and who came in second. And these things that you can't possibly see, any of you, are maps that are cartograms that are sized by the electoral vote. So you can see the country getting bigger as the states join it, and you can see the kind of the big overall patterns in who wins the electoral vote. So you can see a solid Democratic South changing into a solid Republican South as you come down in here. And you can see sort of, wow, if it was a landslide election or if it was kind of a split among the states. And there's lots of other details that I won't go into today, but like 3 measures of the economy in this column and of the budget, of the deficit and debt. And this is the kind of a visual history of the cabinet, because it was very few members, it's very small cabinet growing to much bigger.
Question. I don't know if you would know this information off the top of your head, but these are fantastic posters. I'm a great admirer of your work. I am curious how many person hours these different posters took. They represent an incredible investment of time. And I'm just curious in how that breaks down in terms of the research, the data collection, the data analysis, just how a project like this looks from a time perspective.
So now when we are consulting, we track our hours. When I was starting the company and it was working on sort of my resources and doing projects that I wanted to do, which we try to interleave them now. I purposely did not track that because it was kind of painful. But the answer is they were time consuming. They were multi-month projects. They were kind of labors of love. I think they've, so like they were successful from my viewpoint because some people like them and I like them and I sold a bunch of them, but it's not a sensible thing to do as a business, probably.
Well, I'm trying to get a sense of scale. Like, let's say, how many months, how many people?
Well, the Supreme Court poster, which we'll go into detail, was me and really one other person, and that wasn't the only thing I was doing with my time at the time. So, and I would say it was a 4 or 5 months, from beginning to end, and pretty much full time for him. Although he was also building, this was before Shopify and stuff. He was also building the website to sell it and do things like that. So, and that's Frank Hamilton. I should give him a lot of credit for those early 2 posters. So this is a lovely poster, I think. This is Yep.
These graphs are really beautiful, but if I did this at work, I'd get fired because generally, even if you put 2 series on a graph where I work, people's eyes will gloss over. So my question to you is, how do you know if the person who's looking at your graph has a competency to understand what is out there? Because I sure as hell cannot figure this out. And if you have to spend more time explaining to me what the graph is, I'm in trouble.
Right. We anticipate.
I'm going to reinterpret the question.
No,
How in the world did you sell these?
So we actually anticipate that question this afternoon. Here's what I think. I think that when you cover a topic that people have a real and deep interest in, that they will take the time, if you don't insult their intelligence, to dig into it, and they will be more interested in it. Now, this is not, this is not a poster, the visual history of U.S. state boundaries. It's not a poster for everybody. I mean, everybody's giggling. But there are actually a ton of people. There's a book that sold a ton, and there was a series on like PBS or something about the creation of the state boundaries. There's a bunch of books on it. There's a focused audience there that people like. This particular one came out of my brother and I in 2000 wanting to write a book on all the different boundary systems in the US, the zip code boundaries, the area code boundaries, the time zone boundaries, the congressional district boundaries, all these different things that we have a weird interest in. So I was like kind of fulfilling something that I want to do with my brother by doing this crazy poster and driving my employees at the time nuts with all the details on this. But what we want to do is kind of show what are the types of boundaries that make up the U.S. and go into a lot of detail about what explains the strange shape of the different states. But so I guess that partially answers the question. I think that people who are really interested in the Supreme Court, constitutional scholars and political scientists and students and anyone else with a real interest in that subject will take the time to understand a history. And that Supreme Court posters ended up in multiple justices' offices and lots of law schools and random people. So I'm pretty happy with it. So this is the one that we're going to go into some detail on to talk just about the process of creating it.
In the time we have.
In the time that we have. Well, I think there's, yes.
We have some.
Okay. Well, what time do we go to? I was hearing 8:45. Okay. So we'll go fast then. So this is a history of the Supreme Court. It's the first one I did. And do you want to ask questions about it, or should I just kind of?
Well, so my first question looking at this, most of these posters have like a one clear visual centerpiece, which is something you can talk about, Nathaniel. But with this one, my first question is, what is the y-axis and what's going on with this central graphic?
So, right. So what I wanted to hear is sort of tell the history of the Supreme Court, but try to figure out a way to tell it where it's somewhat visually interesting and where I can orchestrate a lot of information coming from a lot of different directions that come together with the timeline. So the timeline, let me just take x-axis first, is beginning of the Republic to the end, going across. And each of these lines in the central graphic represents a seat on the Supreme Court. Not everybody knows, but the Supreme Court started out with 6 people and grew to 9, and it's been sitting at 9 for a long time, even though Franklin Roosevelt tried to up it to 15 in the court packing scheme because he was getting a lot of his legislation overturned. So you can track on each of these lines who the judge was, who each justice was, and how it changed and at what point it changed. And rather than just carrying straight lines across, I wanted to make a up and down of the curve, we called it the river, that indicated something. And in this case, it sweeps up the more Republican appointees are on it. So there's a point here where all 9 seats were appointed by Republican presidents. There's a point right here where all 9 seats were appointed by Democratic presidents. And if you think about that, it would be a step function, right? Each time you have an appointment, it would change by 1 step. But we did a smoothing of it to make it a little more interesting to look at. And then you can see, so up here is a timeline of the presidents. And so each court is kind of known by the Chief Justice, the Warren Court right here. But also, if you want to know what sort of, we were thinking about presidential influence on the court. So because we're talking about appointees. So here's Franklin Roosevelt serving from here to here, then Truman. And that circle, that half circle, is sized by the total number of justice days of all the justices that he appointed. So you can see visually very quickly that he had a lot of influence on the court. And you can see that Lincoln did. going up and red and Republican. So tying these two timelines together was part of that. And then down here are the landmark cases. And that was a big process of talking to people about what are the most important, say 55, 60 cases that have come in the history of the public, talking to scholars, looking at other lists and making decisions, breaking that up into federalism and civil rights and civil liberties and so on, property. And so this is where, say, Dred Scott happened, a kind of notorious case if you know anything about 19th century American history, about slavery. And if you follow up this little line that no one can see to where it intersects with the timeline of the justices, you can see how each of those justices voted aye or nay with a circle that's colored, filled in or not. And so you can see who was on the court and how they voted. So trying to put together, and there's all these little call outs with information about things that were happening at this point in history, trying to put together what the court ruled on, who was on the court, who was appointing people to the court, and then on the side, little biographies of every justice, very brief, and on the bottom, very short descriptions of all those landmark cases, and some other details up here about like who are the longest serving justices and the most what was that, notable unconfirmed nominations. Just trying to put a bunch of stuff together.
So Nathaniel, if I wanted to try and understand how you're making the circles, so or anybody else who's trying to squint their eyes and see if you have 20-1 vision or something, I'm standing next to it and can't read it. I don't think these screens have the resolution to show all the detail, but you can see the circles, and the circles are labeled blue or red, I presume, for the justice that is voting.
The color of these circles right here?
The circles in the stream.
Oh, in the stream. Yeah, no, that's the color of the president that appointed them.
Okay, so it's when they were appointed and the color.
And that band across the top is a legend for the whole thing, so you can read and understand what all the symbology is.
So then it's the little circles along the very bottom that are how they voted? Did I hear you wrong?
No, it's the little tiny black or the little bullets here. So not the big circles. Those have big numbers in them, which is like justice number 42, justice number 43, justice number 43.
That's what that white smudge is.
Right, and then I suggest you go look out the printed one outside. It's actually quite clear on
So
that.
this sort of gets at the question that was really good, but was raised earlier. How do you expect someone to consume this?
Right. So
very carefully over time.
Yeah, my idea was this goes up on your wall, and if it's on your wall and you're interested in the subject, you're going to visit and you're going to revisit it. It's definitely not something that you read like a book. It's something you go up to and you think about from time to time. We have one in my dining room at home, and guests like to look at it.
I just have a quick question about the programs you used. You mentioned R. I didn't know R could go that far. And then also Illustrator.
Yep.
So if you could just sort of layer for us which parts of the Illustrator, which parts are R, which automatically populate with the data you have in them. If you change the data, then it changes the graph and so forth.
Yep. So almost all of this is R. What is not R is the big title, the border, the seal, and I think there's a little bit of other cleanup work, but basically we would program the whole thing in R, generate a PDF, pull that PDF into Illustrator, and finish it up over there. And by the way, I'm not sure that was the best way to do it, but that's what we found to do at the time. R has enough graphics that you can put a pixel or a circle or a letter wherever you want, so you can program to do anything.
Just what are packages?
I'm not sure I remember. I'd have to look.
So,
but nothing, like basically built in R stuff with a few graphics libraries.
So I'm a real amateur to this space, but I am interested in political information, and I work in the election law and policy space. And I'm just curious to hear your thoughts. I mean, I think a lot of people in the elections community are interested or have a renewed interest now in finding out the ways that data can be useful to them, not only to people who run these organizations that throw election parties, but also for the voters who want to know more about their representatives. And I mean, there's someone for me, from my perspective, not knowing a bunch about this stuff. I mean, I am a lawyer, I'm an election policy person, and I still don't know where to focus my attention. So I'm just curious and would love to hear your thoughts about how you go about creating the visuals and knowing, what sort of information that you want to convey for your audience.
So I think that's a good question. I think what we will do is now kind of walk through the process that we took on this poster. And by the way, this is very different than the process that we take with clients who have a mission that we're working. Jeff, our creative director here, has a process that he works with people who have their own data, who want to tell their stories with it. But this is how we did this, or I did this back in 2009. I didn't know what I was doing, but I learned along the way.
And one common thing, though, I think, is the first question in the process, which is, what is the central story?
Yeah. So, why don't you?
Two real quick questions. You said you might not have done it with R. Do you know what you would have done it with?
Well, now I think I would want to build it in something that would both work for print and for web, right? And use and work out of the same data and create and use a lot of the same routines and use it both online and off. These became very much print products, and we did do some interactives based on the same data, but I would think about them more. In fact, I would love to hear suggestions from people who are more up to date or fond of certain tools. Please tell me about good ways to do this if I'm looking. We do, yeah, a lot of our work is in D3 now for online stuff, but we rarely have the time to do a big Supreme Court type poster, although we're working on a history of baseball.
But one other question, totally different. If lots of times when something's visualized, it's like, oh wow, I never even realized that.
Yeah.
Was there something out of the Supreme Court thing that's like, oh, I didn't know that this was really going on, or somebody?
I think much more so with the House poster, right, where you saw those big patterns come out. But with the Supreme Court poster, I think where it's successful, at least for me, is I'm not a student of the Supreme Court, and but I had read enough history to know where some of the big cases came down, and for me to be able to place them sort of, how far along in our country's history did this happen? To make those interrelationships between the president and who was on the court and what decisions, that's helpful to me, and I've heard other people say it is. But I mean, if it's successful, that's the kind of thing it will do, is help you have a mental image of the court that lets you think about it in a different way. If 20 people made posters like that, they would all be wildly different. So this is how I started all of the first posters. I unrolled a big thing of a paper and started to sketch what I thought the story was. And I also, working with people who were working for me, took some of the data, put it into R or into Excel or whatever, and just graphed it. Because I wanted to, sometimes I just need to see the data to see what it looked like. You've probably all done this, right? So, I knew enough. Here was the probably the first graph we did, which is a long timeline of all the justices, all, just bumping up each time there's a new one. Well, here's one where it's broken down into the different seats on the court. So you can see how long everybody lasted. It's very rough, just laid out kind of in blocks. Go ahead, Will. Here, I was trying to think about the influence of the executive on the Supreme Court. So we calculated the total appointed justice days, that thing that becomes those circles, those size circles. And this might be a better way to present that information if that was the only information that you were working on. But, you know, Franklin Roosevelt, Long Bar, then Andrew Jackson, then Abraham Lincoln, you can really see right there who had the most influence, at least in terms of justice days. So then we started to look at this idea of the river. This is actually drawn just in Illustrator, I think, or something. You know, it's going to be something like this, right? And here, you know, here's a timeline, and here's where some cases were, just sketching, really, but sketching in R. Go ahead. We were trying some concepts. What would it look like if it was like red above the river and blue below the river? Yeah. Here was trying it with, you know, the various sort of parallel-ish lines. I don't think this was based on the data yet, but a little bit it was, and laying out some of the other information. Can't even read and don't remember what the details were. This was kind of, let's stay there for a sec. This is like the first sort of labeled what we call river. Every justice laid out in these lines with the little circles for beginning of term and end of term. This is, you know, experimenting with bigger dots that are numbered, and the justice days currently as rectangles. Go to the next one. Another step along the way. Here's attempting to lay it out and see what it looks like a little bit more if we put we put some text at the top and our brand and the seal, and start to lay out a little bit of the landmark cases. And you can see, like, every one of these we print out, have a big plotter, print them out, and you can see my little, well, probably can't, but there's lots of little handwritten comments as we kind of do iterations. Hey, Will, you want to skip to the next one? Sorry about that. Here's some of the code. So this is just our code, and we just did a screenshot from our studio of the part of the code that does those circles and sizes them. It's just, you know, we read in the data and we plot some stuff on the screen or on the paper. Start PowerPoint again.
Well, one question I just had was, Nathaniel,
So we had some questions, that's why I asked you. On the social media webs, people were asking about what the website was for the challenge that is due on the 11th. And apparently it's Major League Data Challenge, but
yeah, so majorleaguedatachallenge.com is the contest website that you can go to. So one question I was just getting to, Nathaniel, is clearly you think there's value in printing things out and working in the physical, not just on the screen. Can you talk about that?
Well, it might partially be my generation or something, but I definitely find that even if I'm like editing paper, I feel if I print it out and I mark on it, a lot of times I think it activates a different part of your brain. You know, I can edit on a word processor. I did tons of that. I can work on a monitor to code or whatever. But I think there's something about having the whole thing in front of you, not just a window of the screen, and then to look at it and to make edits and think about it. You know, here's this Supreme Court poster being worked on. Hey, I don't want these things here. I want them here. I want you know, some call outs right here. I want a logo. I want, you know, I'm not happy with the spacing here. I want to, you know, that's me being an editor saying, let's change this. And another thing that I've noticed, just not exactly to the question, but it's really amazing the difference between an in-process product and the final one. And something happens at some point where suddenly becomes a much more finished thing. It's kind of miraculous, I think. And this is not there yet. I think this is getting closer. Doesn't have like background color, doesn't have the border, doesn't have other sort of finished elements. And that is the last one that we printed, I guess. Go to the next. Okay.
Can you go?
Yep.
Can you go back one more? So there are little green dots on the bottom.
Yep.
I was wondering what those ended up being.
Oh, these green dots were amendments to the Constitution, I think. Is that what they are? Or no? No, that's these. Those, I think those were the admission of states to the Union, because it's a very important part of the whole court, but I think we took those out. Those got edited out. These lines? Oh, these. Okay, so this is all based on partisanship, right? That's because there's ideology data on the Supreme Court. The New York Times has used it to visualize the Supreme Court recently. Beautiful work that they do. But it's only available from this point in history to here, because it's kind of based on taking all of the votes and doing some kind of numerical process and calculating the ideology of each justice for each session. And so I wanted to put that up here as a little inset and say, here's the most conservative justice, here's the most liberal justice, and here's the median justice. So you could see kind of how the ideology of the court changed during the period where we could actually say something about it. I think if I had it for the whole time period, I would have based the curve on that. I would have preferred that. Yep.
Did you spend any time speaking with constitutional law scholars when you were putting this together, or did you go about it relatively independently?
No, we talked to quite a bunch of them. So political scientists that specialized in the history of the Supreme Court, constitutional scholars, a guy who was a lawyer who had argued a case at the Supreme Court, just friends of mine that were lawyers. The main part of that was get kind of rounds of feedback on a nearly polished one, but also the decisions that we made about the landmark cases, which were well out of my capability to make those choices.
In asking those experts, did they have strong? Nobody can hear you.
In asking those domain experts about the sort of Supreme Court history, did they have strong opinions on whether you were right or wrong about certain things?
Yeah, I mean, I had people who made suggestions that were good that I took. I had people who thought that I was making mistakes mainly in that y-axis question. People were not so sure about that choice. I think I would say actually that there wasn't a ton of strong opinions, but there were a ton of detailed opinions about different parts of it. That answers your question. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that does. I mean, I really wanted to know if they wanted to sort of guide you with their opinions that were rooted in their domain expertise, rather than, let's listen to the data.
Can you repeat the question?
Can you repeat the question? I can't.
I think he was just commenting. I'm just going to move on, and
okay.
I'm actually curious about. You keep talking about calculating conservative versus liberal.
Yeah.
We keep glossing over that.
Okay. Well, I'm glossing over it because there was a point in time where I really knew about how that was done, but it's sort of that point in time is somewhat gone by. There are for the Senate and the House, there are two political scientists who go through and put all the roll call data into a pot statistical process, which I don't remember how they do it, and come out with that ideology data. And there's separate two political scientists, which we all cite, that do it for the Supreme Court. And I can't recall their names at the moment, but all that you can, if you're interested, you can investigate, and you can use that data that they provide openly, and you could use it for your own project, as we did. So I can go to the next. So
a quick question. I'm a little new at this. You were talking about going through this exploratory phase and finding the story of the data, but what brought you to finding this river? Like, what brought you to choose a river to represent this data?
Well, I guess I was interested in relationship, as I think I said a little bit, the relationship between the executive and the Supreme Court. And so that river and the changes in the Supreme Court ideologically over time. So that was sort of the best I could do to say, how did that court move? You can't really say left or right, but to some degree left or right over time. How did that, because there is a lot of notion, like, you know, the fight we're having right now about Scalia's successor, right? That there's a huge difference between a justice from the right, like Scalia, and someone that might be appointed by Obama or Obama's successor if it's a Democrat, if she's a Democrat. So, you know, we know that it matters who makes the appointment. We know also that some presidents are not happy with the results of their appointments, right? We know Eisenhower was not so happy with having appointed Warren and I think one other justice. But that river and that up and down is a result of the combination of needing to tell the story of something that has 9 seats that change over time and trying to use the up and down to indicate something about that kind of change. So I'm going to move quickly through some other things, and you can ask me questions if you find any of them interesting that kind of turned up in the process of building this poster. So, and what a reviewing cycle and consulting with experts has been asked a little bit. The business of seals and asserting copyright, there's stories a little bit in that area. We used Mechanical Turk at Amazon for some of the proofreading. So he took the poster, submitted it out, and let people find errors in it, and they did. And also they made suggestions. So we used sort of a little bit of a distributed workforce to help us because we're just a tiny group of people trying to do something. And then there's all this business of, okay, we have it, how do we sell it? And what does it mean to print and have inventory and fulfill and deal with sales tax and all the other things about having a little company? This is long before Etsy or some of the other ways to outlet. We ran into a little thing with the ownership of one data point that somebody felt that was hers and proprietary. That was the religion of each Supreme Court justice, which she had collected. And I have to apologize to her. There's questions about the thickness of the paper and whether it should be printed on really fine paper or really fat paper. The whole marketing, how we designed the Timeplots logo, because I think it did that in a different way than most people. And then other interesting things. Here I think is maybe my most, like, if there was any lesson that I had from this crazy process, is that just doing, it's like, you might say, why would you do something like this? It's, I think part of the answer is that when you do something in the world, it's astonishing how often that leads to other things, right? So I didn't know anything about visualizing data particularly, although I paid attention to it some and collected some other people's posters. But by tackling this and putting the effort into it, it started to lead to things for me and for the company. It led to getting interviewed by SCOTUS blog, which is the premier blog on, and they went in and they did a little feature on that, and that was kind of fun. And, where was I going to be treated as some kind of expert on the Supreme Court? By nobody until I did this, right? So, and it led to connections. Like, I don't know if you guys know Richard Saul Wurman, who's the founder of TED and has written like 82 books on understanding different things with information. He invited me up to his basically palace in Rhode Island, and we got to know each other and we talked about this. He started, we started to be friends because he liked this work in the same quirky way I do, I think. And then now he's doing a book with a whole bunch of famous people and me, and I get to be a chapter in that. Right? That's kind of fun. So you seeing it in law schools and seeing it in the Supreme Court gift shop and things like that came from putting the effort out. I just think if you participate in the world and you take projects, particularly ones that are close to you in some way, things come from that. So that's one thing that I kind of learned from this, or knew before but learned again. So this is the the first, I think this is the first version of the website, or maybe the second, we just took it off of the Internet Archive. We kind of built it ourselves. It was a slider here with different pieces of the posters, and I didn't know anything about marketing to consumers. I knew something about selling software to politicians and political parties and things like that. But trying to learn that whole thing, trying to learn, how do I drive people to this website? How do I get them by? How many, if I get 1,000 people to the website, how many are going to buy a history of the presidency?
So, what did you sell this for? And did you
Give them the mic
experiment
so we
with
can hear them back here.
How much did you sell this for, and did you experiment with the price, or did you have a feeling for what a good number was?
I started at $45. I think it's come down a little bit. We did a little bit of A/B testing at one point. I didn't see much impact from the price. The one thing that I mean to change and haven't gotten to is that so we actually charge the shipping and the handling, and it's really the cost of the tube also that we get charged by the printer that fulfills for us. I didn't want to get into the having to roll and ship business, but I think by adding that to the price, we get a lot of cart abandons. So I'm thinking about maybe raising the price a little bit and pulling that off, because there's so much free shipping right now from people like Amazon that people will get close to buying something and see, oh, $9 more. Screw that, And then we did a lot of experimenting with packaging. You get the set of all 4 of the government posters for a lower price per unit. That worked relatively well. So that's hopefully answers that question.
And one back here.
Okay.
I really like that Supreme Court graphic. My question is, you're PDFing it and putting it out as a printed poster for wall display, and I wondered if you've ever thought of making it more dynamic, as many people in this room do dynamic visualization, kind of Tableau style in layers, where you could maybe click on an individual year and you go down to all the cases in that year and how each of the justices voted on those cases. And the reason so then your whole suite of information becomes in effect a top layer to thomas.gov. The reason I asked that is 3 years ago, I was a federal employee with Health and Human Services, and I was part of the data team that put together data for our attorneys to go into the Supreme Court and argue against the third Republican major challenge to Obamacare, which was the issue of, could you enforce individuals in non-state exchange states to make them take out insurance policies? And we spent hundreds of hours trying to second guess how each individual Supreme Court justice might vote and what kinds of data arguments they might be most susceptible to. And if we could have had a tool like yours doing that dynamic stuff down to the individual justice level, I think it would have cut our time by 2/3.
So the answer is definitely we thought about how to do this as an interactive. And I think there's a whole lot of advantages to that, right? The distribution is so much easier. The ability to hyperlink to any other piece of information on the web, all kinds of things like that. And there are tools for, the LexisNexis of the world that provide a lot of this data in different formats, usually for subscription. And we did some interactives. The problem is that those interactives are also a big investment. Right, and having gone down this road and built these posters, I couldn't yet justify, hope to sometime, but couldn't yet justify additional expenditure to redo it as an interactive. But we do this for clients now, and they pay us, and maybe one of these days we'll revisit these projects.
I'm checking Twitter right now, but submit your picture of your index card when you have a chance.
And one other thing I'd like to mention is, so we're a small company, but we're always looking for talented people to work with us, whether it's contractors or as coders or designers. So I know there was a few people looking for jobs, but if you have interest in working on projects like this or projects for clients that are usually a lot more E3 oriented or maybe a little less ambitious and intricate, but also interesting that we're always looking for people. And we're located in the WeWork over in Shaw, which is a lovely place to work. So, any final questions?
I'm coming.
I gotta wait for the thing. So a lot of times in data science, people say that 80% of the work is in wrangling and getting your data into a form that you can then run algorithms on it. And a big part of data science is also communicating your result to the customer. And a lot of times people stop short of that and not generate a useful visual or not communicate to their customer after they've done all this work. So I like to say that the other 80% of data science is typically generating that visual. Are those numbers right?
What's amazing is you hit them exactly. I mean, it really varies by project, I think. I mean, there are projects where the data wrangling is hellish and that takes a huge portion of it. And there's others which are very worthwhile where you're working with very clean data and that part of it is nothing at all. I know that Will's been working on a project which has involved a ton of wrangling lately and we have others going on similar, kind of in parallel that's not the issue at all. Sometimes we're working on projects that the data is the result of a study that different academics did, and they have a clean table of it, and all we have to do is work with that. Sometimes we are compiling different sources or helping people extend a time series that they already have and they don't know how to extend. It just
It depends.
I think the important thing is to be clear up front and that everyone's on the same page about what's going to be required.
A clear answer to a political question. So let's give Nathaniel a round of applause. So we're not quite done. If you haven't done it yet already, take a picture of your index card and submit it. I'm going to go to Twitter. And let's do a search here for pound DataViz. And whoa.
That's Catherine, man.
Yeah, somebody's cheating. Somebody's Catherine is here. You know, she wants that T-shirt pretty bad.
Using paper? Someone's using paper.
So the way we go about doing this, yeah, it's the index. Yeah, right. So she's got her iPad Uber.
Wait, that's not me, FYI. That's Aaron.
Of course it's not.
There's some pros here.
There's some pros here.
That's crazy.
So we're going to go through these one by one, and just so everybody can see them. So Erin, are you here? I assume there's Erin right there. That's hers. She was using an iPad, so we can just a Surface. Excuse me. It's like saying Kleenex. You know, the type of iPad is a Surface. So let's see. I think I gotta open that up.
That's not an entry, and it's also safe for work. I don't know why.
Oh, you're trying to get me in trouble here.
It's just a picture of these two.
It's a picture of those two.
I don't know why it does that.
Okay.
It makes me like one.
Oh, we'll ignore that. Okay. So we've got this one here. Is that everybody can see it? So we got charts, pizza, beer, intros, Trump, background charts, question, reflection. Make data great again. I love this guy. He's so crazy. I don't even know how to respond. I just start giggling. I think that's just view the conversation. Is there anything in there? I think.
Ooh, that's a nice one.
Yeah, that one's really nice. I think there's one more. Is that in here somewhere? So Chief is promoting, and then Tony is that's from before. So we have two.
Aaron wins.
Yeah, I don't know if this is like a competition. I think this one wins, yeah? All right. Aaron, do you want to say anything about this? Because this is overwhelmingly detailed. Do you want to come up for a second? It's cool. Nobody bites.
She only garage business.
Come on up, come on up. It's good. Everybody encourage her. Tell her it's...
Walk us through it.
Yeah, walk us through it. Like, you've got, that's obviously the vehicle there.
Yeah, well, I started with your logo because I am admittedly new to this community. So I started sketching that guy and setting up shop because I wasn't sure what was going to be presented. And I saw Nathaniel, so I quickly sketched him, got the logo up here, and just started listening to him, recording what he was saying all the way through. So he started with the story, caught some pictures from his slides, and just kind of kept
This is
going.
the one where it's like all the
Yeah,
people
the
in
poster.
company? Yeah.
Yep. And picked up, he talked about the just trends led to biz. And so I caught a couple questions. And then one key thing for me was he's a data storyteller, but specifically in politics. And that was calling to me. And then I mentioned it in the tweet, but a message of participate in the world and things come from that. So show up and do what you love. And things are great. So here I am doing what I love.
Yeah. So I think Anthony mentioned going to the big hunt. I think a few of us are going to do that afterwards. But if I called you to come on up, now's the time to come up. But otherwise, you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here forever. There is plenty of beer for a little while, and hang out. Thank you for coming.
Coming to the bar after? Probably. I can't.